Payback channel. My name is Thomas Allen Munn. I'm the creator and host of the Payback channel. The purpose of the Payback channel is to help Americans who have ordinary money-making skills, in other words, America's middle class, understand what they have at stake regarding how much America taxes, how it taxes, and who it taxes. In this second episode on the national debt, I'll discuss how its unchecked growth endangers America. To date, America doesn't have to have suffered much, except for making the rich richer, for engaging in intergenerational theft. Victim generations have yet to suffer from intergenerational theft. Since 1980, America's national debt has grown by $16.25 trillion, and the private wealth of the top 1% has grown by $19.6 trillion. Within thieving generations, the top 1% pocketed the overwhelming share of the loot stolen from victim generations. To say that America isn't suffering from skyrocketing national debt is much like a smoker with undiagnosed cancer saying that they haven't suffered from smoking. Nothing will stop the inexorable growth of the national debt until enough voters feel enough pain to force the political process to stop it. And to date, nothing indicates that they have. Unlike individuals who have ceilings on their credit cards, America has no ceiling on its ability to borrow. As a practical matter, America can issue unlimited amounts of debt because its debt will never default and it can buy its own debt. America's debt will never default because rollover debt can be issued to refinance existing debt, and additional debt can be issued to finance new shortfalls in tax revenues. America routinely purchases its own debt through both trust funds, which acquire it to finance Social Security and Medicare, and the Federal Reserve, which acquires it to contain long-term interest rates. As of 2018, the government owned about 37% of the national debt. Even if the government owns its own debt, it nevertheless must be repaid because with tax dollars, or the beneficiaries of Social Security and Medicare will lose their benefits, and America will lose credibility in the capital markets. While America can issue unlimited amounts of debt, it can't control the interest on its debt. Most likely, the only kind of pain that will force the political process to stop the growth of the national debt would be an intolerable increase in interest on the debt, a matter of which the political process can't control. Interest rates are set not by politicians, but by investors who compare the credit quality of America's debt with all other debt available in global markets, and then bid for it accordingly. Leading investors include about 20 foreign countries, including many countries in the EU, China, and Japan, who collectively own about 30% of the debt, with the remaining debt owned by the government and major institutional investors. Investors who participate in global debt markets are all sophisticated, knowledgeable, greedy, mercenary, and make investment decisions on the basis of the ruthless pursuit of self-interest. As long as America remains both the world's largest and most prosperous economy and politically stable, America will be able to sell its debt at the lowest interest rates of any debt in the market. But the moment investors find a better deal, meaning debt that markets believe is of a higher credit quality, America will have to pay higher interest rates on its debt, perhaps much higher interest rates. A critical measure of America's prosperity is its per capita personal income. Since the national debt is payable from taxes, and over 90% of tax revenue comes from taxes on income, the growth of per capita personal income largely determines the creditworthiness of America's debt and the health of the economy. Measured by the growth of per capita personal income since 1980, America is 168% richer in real terms, and on the surface it appears much more able to pay interest on the national debt. Beneath the surface, however, America's per capita national debt has grown by 515%, or more than 3 times faster than its per capita personal income. In 1980, the per capita personal income to per capita national debt ratio was a healthy 2.56 to 1, but by 2018 it had fallen to a puny 0.83 to 1, making the national debt less secure. While the fall in per capita personal income to per capita national debt ratio has been alarming, sirens haven't gone off because America has been able to finance its debt on the cheap. For the past decade, interest rates have been abnormally low because of the following special circumstances. The economic crash caused by the Great Recession of 2008 sharply shrank the demand for capital, which depressed interest rates. The anemic recovery from the Great Recession suppressed the demand for capital, which also depressed interest rates. A capital glut in the global economy as pointed out by many prominent economists such as Ben Bernanke, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, has suppressed the demand for capital, which also depressed interest rates. And for the last generation, the global economy has been subject to both low inflation and slow economic growth, which also depressed interest rates. Low interest rates have created an incongruity in that although the national debt is near an historic high, interest payments as a percentage of government spending are near a 40-year low. Since 1980, interest payments on the national debt as a percentage of total government spending have ranged from a high of 15.4% in 1996 to a low of 5.3% in 2009, with the average being 10.7%. In 2018, interest payments were only 8.8% of government spending, well below the average because the interest rate was only 1.51%. Since 1980, the interest rate on the national debt has averaged 3.9%. That's 2.6 times the rate in 2018, with the high being 7.5% in 1982, 5 times the rate in 2018, and the low being 1.23 in 2015. For perspective, in 2018, the interest payments on the national debt was $325 billion, compared with $631 billion spent on defense, $25 billion spent on higher education, $588 billion spent on Medicare, and $988 billion spent on Social Security. Had the interest rate on the national debt in 2018 been the 40-year average rate, the interest payment would have been $510 billion more, and had it been the 40-year high rate, the interest payment would have been $1.28 trillion more. For each percentage point increase in interest in the national debt, the degree of pain inflicted on Americans will intensify at an accelerating rate. A 2 or 3 point spike in interest rates could prompt a financial crisis in which the political process would be forced to choose between, on the one hand, letting the national debt explode, or on the other hand, some combination of massive cuts to social insurance and increases in taxes. Doing nothing about a spike in interest rates isn't an option because it would only delay the inevitable and make exponentially worse the pain to be felt from coping with a crisis. A spike in interest rates wouldn't only force a spending taxing crisis, it would financially stress all Americans. Higher interest rates would mean both more expensive mortgages, car loans, and credit card interest, all of which would reduce the standard of living of most Americans, and slow economic growth. With its national debt at a post-war high and headed for an all-time high, America has delivered itself as hostage to its creditors who control the interest rates on its debt. America now lives with the danger that its creditors, all of whom are sophisticated, knowledgeable, mercenary, and ruthlessly self-interested, could at any time demand that America pay much higher interest rates on its debt. With every passing day, this danger compounds. As the national debt grows, this growth makes the remedial actions necessary to first contain its growth and then reduce it far more difficult. Even though America has so far avoided a debt crisis, it's almost certain that a day of reckoning will come, but no one knows when. The day of reckoning could be months or years or a decade or more away, depending upon a number of factors, foreseeable and unforeseeable. Some of the leading factors that could trigger a debt crisis include a significant fall in America's per capita personal income, the capital glut dissolving into a capital shortage, a sharp increase in inflation, some other nation's debt, such as China's or the EU's debt, becoming more attractive to investors than America's debt, a financial crisis erupting in some far corner of the world that goes viral, or some other extraordinary event that roils global markets. Many of the risks that might ignite a debt crisis aren't hidden, but in plain sight for all to see. It's foreseeable that if America fails to invest in the future of its workforce, its workers could become demoralized and ill-equipped to compete successfully in the global economy, which would result in America's per capita personal income falling and its debt becoming less creditworthy. Debt-ridden countries might set off worldwide inflation by attempting to inflate their way out of economic distress, which would result in higher interest rates. Today's capital glut could be depleted by trillions of dollars being consumed by wars, natural disasters such as droughts, flooding, earthquakes, fires, or storms, the need to combat a recession, and/or the need to take care of retirees in countries with aging demographics, like America, the EU, and China, and Japan, any of which would result in higher interest rates. Beyond these and other similar foreseeable risks, economies are always subject at any time to unforeseeable risk. Only a fool would assume that nothing will happen over the next decade that could force a steep increase in interest rates. In the world of personal finance, prudence dictates that a household build up and maintain a rainy day fund to mitigate the effects of a family emergency. In the world of business, prudence dictates that businesses reserve a part of their profits against both foreseeable and unforeseeable risk. In government, prudence dictates that governments reserve some of their revenues against foreseeable and unforeseeable risk. America's reserve against both foreseeable and unforeseeable risk is its ability to borrow massive amounts of funds at cheap rates. By inflating its national debt, America has both deprived itself of an essential tool to cope with emergencies and has exposed itself to the occurrence of a debt crisis that could shred its social fabric and poison its political process. Please join me for the next and final episode discussing what may trigger a debt crisis and how it will shred America's social fabric and poison its political process. Thanks for watching.